Margaret Natalie Smith came into the world on December 28, 1934, in a quiet place just outside London. Her beginnings were far from glamorous. Her mother worked as a secretary, her father as a pathologist, and when she was 4, the family settled in Oxford, a city full of books and long, unhurried days. Then, when she was just 9 years old, her father died. That loss did not simply pass through her the way childhood grief sometimes does. It stayed. It made her quieter, more watchful, more attuned to the small movements of people around her. And somewhere inside that silence, she began to understand human nature in a way most children never do. Even then, there was a strange contradiction living inside her. At 4 years old, she had stood in a church and recited poetry with such clarity that she held an entire room completely still and won a contest doing it. Yet outside that single charged moment, she struggled to speak without stuttering. Words tripped over themselves. She would shrink back, unsure how to face people. So instead, she learned to observe. She studied faces, tones, and small gestures. She built a shield out of wit, a sharp comment here, a clever remark there, and people laughed and she stayed in control. Acting gave her something even more powerful than laughter. It gave her a voice that did not belong to her fear. By 17, that quiet and watchful girl stepped onto a real stage at the Oxford Playhouse, playing viola in Twelfth Night. It should have felt like a triumph, and in some ways it was. But behind the scenes, life was far from comfortable. She earned almost nothing, just a few pounds a week, enough to survive and barely that. She lived in cold rooms, ate little more than tea and toast, and counted every coin. Still, every night she stood under the lights playing a character full of life while she herself fought hunger and doubt. That contrast hardened her. It taught her to rely on nothing except her own ability. Then she crossed the ocean. In 1956, she appeared on Broadway in New Faces of 56, and something unusual happened. She did not try to fit in or charm people in the expected way. She leaned into oddness, into sharpness, into something almost uncomfortable. Critics did not know what to make of her at first. Some called her vulgar. Others saw something deeper. Beneath the strange humor and bold delivery, there was a vulnerability, something raw and honest that made audiences laugh while also leaving them slightly uneasy, as if they were seeing something too real. That tension became her greatest strength. Around the same time, she applied twice to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art and was turned away both times. For many people that would have been the end. For her, it was simply a different road. She found her path through the Oxford Playhouse School, built herself through real performances rather than formal approval, and later mocked the institution she had been rejected by, calling it stiff and limiting. The rejection had not weakened her. It had freed her. In 1962, at just 27, she exploded onto the West End stage in the private ear and the public eye, performing 2 completely different roles in the same evening. One moment she was a jealous wife, tense and watchful. The next she was a blind pianist, fragile and exposed. The speed of the transformation shocked audiences. Critics called her electric. Laurence Olivier noticed, and when someone like him notices, doors open quickly. That connection brought her into one of the most intense experiences of her early career, playing Desdemona opposite Olivier's Othello. It was not calm or controlled. There were moments on stage that felt dangerously real, including a night when he struck her harder than expected and left her genuinely stunned. She later described it as a kind of battle, 2 strong wills pushing against each other. And from that friction came something alive. Her Desdemona was not simply gentle or tragic. She felt frightened and desperate in a way that made audiences feel her unraveling rather than just watching it. Her personal life, meanwhile, was quietly straining under the weight of it all. Her marriage to Robert Stevens started with real promise. They shared the stage, built a family, and for a time it worked. But slowly things broke down. His drinking grew worse, his anger became unpredictable, and she tried to hold everything together while continuing to perform. Eventually it became too much. By 1975 the marriage ended, leaving behind deep pain but also a kind of clarity. She walked away not only for herself but for her children, and she kept going. Her film career had its own complicated beginning. Her first movie failed badly, and she later called it embarrassing. Yet even in that failure, people noticed her. Slowly that small recognition grew into something much larger. By 1969, everything crystallized in the prime of Miss Jean Brodie. Her performance was bold, complex, and impossible to ignore. When she won the Oscar, she had beaten some of the biggest names of that era, and for her it was not just a victory but proof. Proof that her way, her strange and sharp and unpredictable way, actually worked. In A Room with a View in 1985, she stepped into the role of Charlotte Bartlett and made every scene crackle with social poison. Her lines had a sting to them. She brought real venom into Edwardian snobbery and earned another Oscar nomination for it. Then in Gosford Park in 2001, she played an aging aristocrat with all the pride in the world and far less power than she wanted, and that made her character genuinely dangerous. She slipped in extra insults during rehearsals and Altman loved it enough to keep rolling. Helen Mirren's character watched her carefully, and audiences did too, because every line felt like it might land harder than expected. Then came Harry Potter, which gave her a different kind of immortality. When she first walked into Hogwarts in the Sorcerer's Stone, she did not need spectacle to command attention. The camera looked up at her. Her posture was straight, her chin slightly raised, and suddenly Professor McGonagall felt less like an actress in costume and more like a woman who had ruled that castle forever. Even the younger actors felt it. When she arrived on set, the space around her changed. The room no longer felt like a film set. It felt like a classroom, and nobody wanted to disappoint her. She built the character not from wonder at the magical world, but from something far more grounded, leaning into the idea of a strict and deeply intelligent schoolteacher. That distance from the fantasy may be precisely why the character felt so real. She was not playing enchantment. She was playing discipline, judgment, and inner steel. What the audiences never saw was what she was carrying during those later films. While shooting Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince and continuing through Deathly Hallows, she was quietly battling breast cancer. Off camera, chemotherapy left her weak, bold, and deeply exhausted. She later said it flattened her completely, and there were times she had to grip railings just to stay steady between takes. She nearly quit. She was genuinely unsure whether she could finish. Yet the filmmakers believed McGonagall mattered too much to lose, and somehow she forced herself through it. On screen, audiences still saw the stern face, the clipped words, the hard stare. They did not see the private misery behind them. After her death, Rupert Grint spoke movingly about the hidden pain she had endured while still being kind and funny around the younger cast. The children saw the wit, the command, the playfulness, and the professionalism. They did not see the sickness. She carried that alone. In 2010, she arrived in Downton Abbey as Violet Crawley and found a whole new audience. From the moment she delivered the line, "What is a weekend?" with complete and unshakable confidence, she became the heartbeat of the show. The clips spread everywhere, turned into a meme, and became one of those rare television moments that escapes a program and enters everyday culture. But Violet was never just one funny line. She was all timing, rhythm, and perfectly aimed disdain. Writers began shaping scenes around her wit, and Julian Fellows admitted that her presence changed the scripts themselves. She won Emmys and a Golden Globe, and at 75, she was not simply part of a successful series. She was the soul of it. By that point, her health was already becoming a serious struggle. Glaucoma had blinded her in one eye, leaving permanent damage. Reading scripts hurt. Close-ups were painful. Directors had to adjust camera angles to hide the problem, and she had to find ways around her limitations without ever letting them show in the performance. She did not make a public drama out of suffering. She simply carried it and kept acting. In 2019, at 84, she returned to the stage in A German Life at London's Bridge Theatre and took on a 100-minute monologue as the former secretary of Joseph Goebbels. There were no crowd scenes to hide behind, no elaborate movement, no distractions of any kind. It was just Smith, the words, and the terrible moral emptiness of a woman who had lived close to Nazi power and spent years pretending she had not really understood what was happening. She played the character's evasions with such precision that audiences had to sit inside their denial and feel its ugliness. After 12 years away from the stage, she came back and gave a performance many called one of the finest of her entire career. She won her 6th Evening Standard Award for it, and that return proved that age had not dimmed her force at all. If anything, it had sharpened it. When she died on September 27, 2024, at the age of 89, Fans raised ones for her in tribute, and for once the gesture felt completely deserved. McGonagall had always stood for dignity, discipline, and unbreakable strength. Smith had given her all of that, because she had lived all of that. What remained after her death was not simply a list of awards or famous lines. What remained was an image that ran through every part of her career, a woman with a sharp mind, a harder will, and a gift for making every single sentence land exactly where it should. She could terrify children in a manor house, rule an English estate with one raised eyebrow, carry a monologue about moral blindness, or walk into Hogwarts and make the whole impossible place feel real. Even in illness, even in age, even when the work exhausted her, she kept performing with discipline and bite. That is why she lasted. That is why people kept watching.